Max, we are so excited for Dr. Chris Broyhill to be rejoining us. We were so impressed with our episode with him earlier this year. We said, man, there's so much data out there. There's so much changing in the world of compensation. We need to talk to him regularly. So we're excited to announce that Dr. Broyhill and the AirComp Calculator are going to be joining us every quarter to give us a little update on the pilot compensation market. So welcome to the program, Chris.
Thank you. Good to be back here again, guys. And per quarter is very apt timing, because when I age the data in the calculator, I do it on a quarterly basis, and I follow the economic trends in our economy very closely, particularly the growth of private industry compensation. And that's an indice I use to age the data in the calculator. I use the data that's inside the surveys to age the compensation data into the present, but I also use data from the BLS as kind of a dampening mechanism, so it doesn't get too crazy in either direction. And it's been interesting. What I've seen since we last spoke is I've had several anecdotal stories come my way in terms of how perhaps compensation data in its current form, or at least at the 50th percentile, is not really keeping up with the market. And so it's just kind of provides a graphic of this. What I've shown, there's a chart here. The first one we're looking at, it's a graph of the consumer price index versus that indice I mentioned, the private industry compensation growth. But over that, I've laid a line that shows growth of private industry compensation. Of business aviation compensation. And it's important to realize that up the left side is percentage, across the lower axis is years, going from 2015 to 2022. It's important to keep in mind that these are rates of growth. It doesn't mean that we're ever negatively growing. It doesn't ever mean compensation is shrinking. It just means it's growing at either a higher rate or maybe a little bit lower rate. So usually when you're trying to compare consumer price index versus compensation, those are kind of an apple and oranges comparison, in that we're talking about cost of living versus the cost of labor, and the two are not the same thing. However, in this case, it's interesting to see the correlation between the two as we go from 2015 to 2022. And as you can see there, the growth of, the consumer price index from 2015 to 2020 has been kind of, about consistent. It's grown maybe 2% a year down to 1% a year. It's been, pretty consistent. And along the top of that, private industry compensation has paralleled it. It's been pretty consistent also, just above the rate of consumer price index. But then we hit 2020, where we had a landmark event, and into 2021, and shall we say different thought processes came in place about how to manage the economy. And the consumer price index shoots up from 1% in 2020 up to like 6.5%, 6.75% in 2021. And then it ebbs off a little bit, goes down like 6.25% in 2022. During the same period from 2020 to 2022, private industry compensation was rising at 3% per year in 2020. And then 2021, it's growing at a rate of about 4.5%. And then in 2022, it's growing at a rate of 5%. But then we've got the business aviation compensation line, which appears to be erratic, but if you think about it, it really isn't. And it's important to emphasize that blue business aviation compensation line represents an average of 14 different positions, which is what I track with the calculator, across 3 different surveys, multiple surveys. So you can see that, again, there's a significant bump from 2015 to 2016. That's about the time that the airline hiring boom really started to take hold. It started earlier than that, but people started getting it about then. And then it levels off from 2016 to 2017, pops up a little bit 2018, goes down a little bit to 2020, but then from 2020 to 2021, it shoots up from about 3.5% all the way to like 6%. And then from 2021 to 2022, something weird happens. And that is, it goes from 6%, the rate of growth actually goes down across that 1 year period from 2020 to 2021 to 2022. That, for guys like me that live in the data, that is a very puzzling occurrence, because we all know, based on what's going on in the industry, that wages in the industry are not going down, or they're not growing any less. They are, in fact, growing more. So the anecdotal stories that I mentioned earlier, and I should anecdotally anecdotal stories are redundant. But anyway, so I work with people all the time who are trying to find what good rates of compensation are. And I got a call from one guy in that's locally based here, and they're flying globals. And he said, we had this other company come in and do a compensation analysis for us. And this other company has no expertise in compensation analysis at all. They measure other data. But he said, we're driving globals, and they said that we shouldn't be paid any more than 200 grand. And I'm like, what? Huh? And then, which doesn't align with my data. That's the low side of that story. And then I have a friend who's in the recruiting business trying to staff a 7X on the west coast of Florida somewhere. And she can't find anybody, the captain of the jet, who will take a number with less than a 3 in front of it. And my data doesn't show that. Now, as a senior captain flying a jet of that class, 300 is right about the center of the 75th percentile in my data. But that's what they're hearing. And I'm consistently hearing stories like about people asking for compensation in the 3s, flying stuff like G500s, G600s, G650s, 7Xs, the big iron, if you will. So the data isn't really showing that to the extent we would like. So we are in a period of turbulence, I would say, in the data. So let me show something. There's another chart that I provided you guys that deals with the growth of compensation for captains. And you can see, and again, this is multiple surveys across the years. You can see the captains, that's a pretty steady growth curve. It goes up from an average of 20 in 2015, your average captain made about 134 grand, and in 2022 they're now making close to 200, 198. But the rate of increase has slowed somewhat from 2020 or 2021 to 2022. So it's just puzzling to me that that's the case. And then there's another chart I provided you that shows technicians, and that one's even more puzzling, and it represents a trend that kind of parallels the economic trends I showed you before as well, where you see technicians kind of going up and down from 2015 to 2019, growing steadily to 2021, and then ebbing off from 2021 to 2022. Again, that's puzzling. So when something like that happens, that your mind tells you that doesn't make any sense from a data perspective. What that tells me is there are anomalies in the data set. It means that different organizations responded to the data, to the query. It means that different incumbents were in place who responded to the query. What does that really mean? And what does it really look like? Say, for example, you've got a flight department that participated in the survey both years, but they promoted a lot of people from captain to senior captain, or some people left. So the people in those positions changed. So they're still reporting the numbers faithfully, but since the people in those positions changed, you're not getting the same group reporting back, and it can kind of move the needle. So what does all this mean? What it means is, one of the things I constantly advise people to do is you need to pay in the 75th percentile if you want to stay ahead of the market. If you pay in the 50th percentile, you try to bet on the come that paying at the 50th percentile, the median, the middle of the data set, if you pay at that level, you're accepting risk, because you're not going to be ahead of the market. Probably you have all these anecdotal competitions for your personnel, and that like personnel competition is not just coming from the airlines. I mean, we've talked about Delta raising their pay 34%. American's probably going to raise their pay in a comparable amount. FedEx has voted to go on strike. Southwest has voted to go on strike. United is in negotiations. They're all going to settle on contracts here in the near future. And when they do, that's going to push up compensation in business aviation as well, because we're going to fight to keep people. So that competition we have is not just an airline issue directly, it's also an indirect airline issue, because what happens is, I had another company come to me for a consulting job recently where they lost one of their people to an operator down the street, and that operator had lost people to the airlines. So that loss will be direct, it'll be indirect, but it'll definitely be there. So to kind of circle back, economic trends in the industry, what do they mean? What they mean is we need to focus on paying ahead of the curve so that we can do the best we can to retain our people. And I hope I haven't bored everybody with the charts and the stats. So
No, I think it's really interesting. So, especially for folks listening, that couldn't see the chart, it's surprising to see in that downward trend there for the latest data. Here's a thought, and I don't know if this is accurate. What's happened in that last year is the airlines started hiring again, right? 2021, 2022.
mm-hmm.
Were senior people on the higher end of the compensation scale going to the airlines and
Could
their
be.
replacements making less? Could
Could
that
be.
be possibly part of
No,
the
that could
Well,
factor?
and certainly the average new hire, as is the case at the airlines, is the same in business aviation, where the average new hire experience level is less. So that obviously affects where that starting pay is at too. So maybe senior people that were making a lot of money had left, and then more junior people that are starting off, while that compensation is a lot higher than it was a few years ago, is still not where the senior guys and gals.
Yeah, and we're seeing a high degree of turnover in the industry, obviously. So once people get experienced, particularly in the newer, sexier stuff, the G500, G600, Global 7500, Global 7000, those new jets, they become a commodity, and people want them, and they want them badly, and they're willing to pay top dollar to get them, because not only is finding people with experience in those aircraft difficult, it's also, if you hire somebody off the street with no experience and you're trying to get a training slot for that, you're often looking like a year in advance. So you hire these people without experience in the jet that you need them to fly, and then you have to wait a year to train them. But by the same token, you got to pay them there to keep them there, and yet you're paying them to sit around and cool their heels and maybe wait on a pop-up training slot if somebody cancels out at the last minute. It's a really different personnel market these days than it's been, I think, in my entire time in business aviation. And I've been in the industry like over 20 years now. It's different now than it's ever been.
It's almost like, should your survey account for, 50th percentile, 70th percentile, but it's almost like you need a new category, typed and current, and what premium that person commands. Like in your 7X story.
Yeah.
We need to hire a 7X person with time and type that's ready to go. And that is almost a completely different number, because I think what we've learned, kind of what I've seen anecdotally, is that everybody has a job, right? And so to get a new job, to pry someone away from the job they're at, it's going to take significantly more. People aren't going to go chase $2,000 or $3,000 raise.
No,
to go switch jobs. 30,000 a year. Okay, maybe my job's good now, but I guess, if for that much money, I'll switch, and so I think that's an interesting new category. Maybe you should explore, especially when you're talking G500 type airplane where you can't get anyone in for a year. I mean, when you're talking about a budget to operate an aircraft of that size, paying an extra 50, 100 grand a year to somebody to get the airplane to actually move doesn't seem like a ton.
Well, in every case, I just gave a presentation recently at the Tennessee Business Aviation Association's luncheon. And one of the points I emphasized, and I saw a lot of heads nod in the audience when I said it, it is almost always more expensive to replace somebody than it is to pay them a reasonable amount more, maybe 20, 30 grand. I mean, it's always going to be more expensive to replace somebody, even if you're not flying the big iron, even if you're flying. So I recently did a compensation study for somebody in the Midwest. They're flying kind of older equipment that's super midsize. And usually when I do compensation studies, I focus on the class of airplane specifically to draw the numbers out. But this person didn't want that. He compares to everybody, compares to the all-jet average, because we could lose our people not just to another airplane that looks like ours, but to somebody across the ramp who's flying something bigger or better. And I said, you know what, you're wise, and that's what we did. So yeah, I mean, you have to be, if you're going to make a change, it's got to be a change that will benefit, the person who decides to make it, but also it's got to be the person offering the money has to be cognizant of, what that's going to take to lure them over there. And sometimes, so a lot of people will change jobs because they want to fly the bigger, sexier stuff. Somebody will offer them a G500, G600 type rating, and they go, woohoo. And they're willing to take a little bit, maybe a completely lateral move to get into that airplane, even though what they'll be making when they get there might be below what the industry commands, fully knowing that once they get into that airplane and they get current and they get a little mileage on them, then they become a commodity and they can bid for more. And we see that happening more and more often. So it's kind of, for people like me that try to advise people on what to pay compensation wise, it makes the field a bit challenging. And that's why I always kind of default, pay the 75th percentile. Yeah, it's going to cost you some money, but it'll be less than losing people. Pay at the 75th percentile. You got to do it.
Now, Chris, after we saw the reversal in trend there from 21 to 22. Now that we're halfway through 23, and you look at some of this data and on a quarterly basis, what kind of trend are you seeing now that we're halfway through 23?
Well, the general economy, it's picking up. I mean, right now, wages grew BLS-wise 4.8% over the last year for everything private industry-wise that you can think of. So I think business aviation compensation, once the 2023 data lands, which we can expect late summer, early fall, by that time, it'll be time for another quarterly update, and it'll be like a news flash, and I'll tell you what the data says, because I'm eager to see it, because I think we're going to see another upward trend there. I think we're going to recover from the dip we saw in 2022, if you will, and we're going to see a greater rate of increase going into 2023. So that's what my prediction is going to be, because we just, if we're going to keep people in our industry, people are going to have to pay more, and they're getting that. Every time I make a recommendation for somebody, I run a comp study, I'm telling them, yeah, you got to pay more. That's consistently. I've rarely done a comp study where I tell people you're paying enough.
You're paying too much.
Yeah,
These guys. Get rid of
I
these
never
guys.
say the too much word. I always say that you're paying enough. So, but
isn't that crazy?
but yeah, I've yet to do one where I say, yeah, you don't need to pay these people anymore. They're doing great. So every single case, it's, you want to keep them, you need to pay them.
It's a good time to be a pilot.
It is.
I'll say that.
And it's a good time to be a director of aviation, a good time to be a director of maintenance, good time to be a chief pilot. Not the greatest time to be a technician, but technicians are like the unsung heroes in our industry, and we can't get along without them, and we're not making enough of them either. And that's like everybody talks about it, but as you saw on the pay thing, not everybody's doing what they need to do about it to keep these guys and gals, and we need to make more of them. We need to tell young people that it's not a shame for them to make a living with their hands. And yeah,
absolutely, that is well said. Well, we're so excited about this partnership going forward, because it's,
me too.
Like you said, things are always changing, and keeping a pulse on the market is so important. And I like that 75th percentile. That's so easy.
Yeah. Yep.
It's great. Well, and a lot of pilots, they know things are changing.
Yeah.
It's very hard to quantify how much it's changed, or like when everyone knows that, oh, we're all getting raises in this, but to quantify it is a whole different ballgame. And so that's what's a great service that you provide, Dr. Broyhill. We appreciate what you do, and getting down in the weeds with the numbers is something I don't think many of us want to do. So it's nice that we have a resource that does it for us.
Well, when you're a geek like me, you love it. So
listen, I wasn't going to say it, but we appreciate that.
Listen, you can put Dr. Broyhill to work for you. We've got a link to the AirComp calculator in the show notes. You can visit the website, print out a report, print out a few reports, and you can even hire Dr. Broyhill to talk to your HR folks, your C-suite executives, and explain where did the numbers come from? Why is this justified? There's a lot of value in having an independent third party come in and help you explain the marketplace to your principal. So thank you so much for the service you provide, Dr. Broyhill, and we're looking forward to our next quarterly check-in with you. And we're hoping I'm hoping to see a stack of gold bricks on your desk.
Okay, yeah, we'll have a bullion up here for you, just to kind of frame the discussion somewhat.
All right, aircompcalculator.com. Thanks, Dr. Broyhill.
Great, thank you guys.
Hey guys, Dylan and Max here. Thanks for watching the video.
Listen to the full interview at the link in the description, and subscribe to the 21.5 Show anywhere podcasts are heard.